Thanks for tuning into our seller interview series. Up today, we've got a niche dropshipping e-commerce business for sale in the home and garden niche on the BigCommerce platform. The brand offers bird cages for sale to its passionate customer base. The site makes nearly $2,000 per month in net profit, and the listing number on this one is 40261. Now, we do these interviews to give potential buyers more information about both the seller and the sites they're looking to purchase. We hope these insights are helpful for you in making a buying decision. We've got the seller Ahmed with us today to go through the business, cover everything from niche selection to traffic and monetization. Thanks for coming on, Ahmed. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right, buddy. So let's do a quick summary of the business. It was built in November 2012. The monthly revenue on this one is $7,300. That's a 3-month average. The expenses come in at $5,400, and net profit is $1,874 over the last 3 months. It gets about 11,000 page views per month. It's built on BigCommerce, and it has a smaller email list of 110 email subscribers. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, man. Ahmed, we've actually had you on a seller interview before, but for listeners today, can you tell us a little bit about your background in building, running websites and online businesses, and how you came up with the idea to start this site in particular?
Yeah, sure. So I started building websites when I was around like 14 years old. I had a passion for, building and selling websites. And so that continued on for a while. But when I was around 17, we ran into some serious financial issues in my family due to my father leaving. And that was kind of when I took a bigger leap and I decided to purchase a larger site, which was around 40,000 at the time. And I did that through family friend loans and stuff. So I actually ended up, doing really well with that site, and I sold it on Empire Flippers just a few months ago, as you're aware. And then with this site, I also purchased on behalf of an investor who was really impressed with what I had done with the previous site and wanted to be a part of this one. And so I got the capital together and I went out and looked for a niche that would be, both profitable and pretty hassle-free. And that's kind of where I came across this site, and I really liked it.
I think it's really interesting. We talked a little bit before the show about the builder and seller mentality versus the buyer, fixer-upper, and sell mentality. And you're moving into that buy and sell approach, right? Because there's just more value, right? Yes, you have to leverage cash and, you have to put your cash at risk on these deals, but, you just get a bigger return for it. So this is one of those sites where you came across, bought it up, and are looking to sell. When did you buy the site?
I bought it in December of last year, so kind of the end of December, and kind of started running it mid-January once everything was set up.
Cool. And tell me about how the site makes money for those that might be kind of new to e-commerce or dropshipping. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so the earning type is purely through e-commerce, the dropship model, which is essentially when a customer purchases a product or a bird cage from the site, and we have the supplier or the manufacturer send it directly over to the customer themselves. So we kind of get the middle profit. So, we pay the supplier, they send it over, and the customer pays us. So yeah, so that means we never have to carry any inventory or anything like that.
Cool. So the order is, someone goes to the site, they buy it, they pay you. So you've got cash in the bank, and then you'll take a portion of those proceeds, send it to the wholesaler, the supplier, and then they'll go ahead and ship under your brand's name or your company's name to the customer. And they'll have your box and your everything, and looks like it comes from you. So it's an interesting model. Is that automated right now, or is that manually done for each order?
That is manually done right now. And it's essentially through an email system where we have a manager set up over at the warehouse for the supplier, and we just email them out every time there's a new order. And there's actually a specific reason we do that, is because the process could be automated, but the reason I go ahead and do it manually is because if there's ever some sort of special discount or rewards or anything that could be applied to benefit us, our manager over at the warehouse goes ahead and takes care of that, as opposed to if it was done automatically through a system, which would give us a set price each time. But oftentimes we can get even lower than the set price through doing it manually.
Gotcha. How do you get updates in terms of what products are available and like what you need to take down or say discontinued? How do you get those updates? Is that automatic or is that manually done?
Right, so that's pretty automatic. I mean, on the supplier's site, they have kind of like the back end where we can just check whether a product is out of stock or currently in stock. And when it comes to discontinued, I mean, products rarely ever get discontinued in this niche, but if that ever happens, we'll usually get an email from this manager over at the warehouse, and he'll let us know, hey, this cage isn't available anymore, and we'll remove it from the site. But when it comes to, it being out of stock, we usually just leave it on the website as a back order just so customers can still order order it. And, anytime now that it's out of stock, it'll be back in stock within the next few days. So that's usually not a problem.
Gotcha. And how many suppliers do you have and how many SKUs do you have for these products?
Right. So the number of suppliers is actually just two. The number one supplier we use is for all the cages, and then the second supplier we use is for some of the accessories on the site. And I think we have over like 670 cages on the site.
Okay, cool. Now, I was telling you that, one of the reasons I love this niche is that it's a passionate niche. It's people that are really into kind of what they're doing. They have some disposable income. They're in communities, so they're kind of, easier to find online because they kind of congregate and talk about their birds and everything. Tell me a little bit more about the niche. What have you found kind of interesting? What have you found in terms of, a business perspective about the customer base and where they hang out and all of that?
Yeah, right. So it's a very hassle-free niche, and that's what I really liked about it. The product isn't anything complicated. They're bird cages, or they're not anything super technical that would require extensive customer support. And that's always great from a business perspective because, like you said, most buyers in this niche, they're already in such large communities. And, this is such a lifestyle / hobby for them that they're pretty knowledgeable already. So, most of the customer support questions that I do receive on a day-to-day basis are, when will this ship out, or do you have this color in stock? So it's nothing ever too complicated most of the times. And most of the times it's not, most customers already know what they want and already have enough knowledge that I don't have to personally worry about answering too many questions. And a few other reasons was because the margins are great in this niche. And lastly, which is something you mentioned and something I've been pretty consistent with in any site I decide to purchase, is that the target buyer has, disposable income. They're willing to spend money as long as they receive good service and a good product. And that's always been very important to me, that the target market has, that income that they're willing to spend.
How do you get most of your customers? Do you go find them? Do they find you?
Yeah, so most of the customers come organically. So a little over half the traffic is organic, actually just around 51%. And then basically what I do on my end is just to make sure I do social media, post an article a week. So it's just a slow but steady organic growth. And we've just continued to see more and more users coming in either organically or through direct traffic by remembering this from, a previous time they visited. And then there's a little bit of referral traffic, and then about a little under 2% is social media traffic.
Cool. We're going to get into traffic a little bit more. I have some more questions about that. Let me ask you first, though. Let's talk about your reason for selling. Why are you selling the site instead of just keeping it and growing it for yourself?
Yeah, so I'm actually working on another project. It's a startup, and we're basically creating like a RPG type game, which requires a lot of my time and then a good chunk of capital as well, for servers and developers and whatnot. So by selling this site, I'll be able to, put in the needed capital into my startup and free my time to focus on that. And then on top of everything, I'm a college student, which already limits my time significantly. And, I have to focus on classes and then focus on, my startups. I didn't want to have to focus on another thing. So that's kind of the reason, mainly due to the constraint of time and then the need for capital in my other startup.
Awesome. Ahmed, you are a motivated college student, man. I know there's some older guys and gals listening to this going, man, this kid is motivated, dude. What's going on? He's doing some work. All right. So, the cash, you're going to take some of the cash, you're going to put it into your startup. And then you're going to continue potentially with the buying and selling, and you want some additional cash for that. One of the questions that buyers may have is they want to make sure that you're not going to just enter the same market. You're going to stay in the birdcage market, for example, and create competing sites. What would your answer be to that?
Well, I'll just sign a non-compete because I'm not, I'd be willing to sign a non-compete for that. And I normally don't like to go back into the same market only because I like exploring different markets because there's a lot to learn. So normally, like for example, I got out of the Forex market a few months ago and I don't plan to go back in there now because I'm just more interested in learning a bunch of different markets. And quite frankly, I get bored a little easy of the same market. So I'll just, and on top of that, I'll be signing a non-compete so they don't have to worry about that.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about site history. The site was built in November 2012. Is that right? When you purchased it, do you remember looking at what the trajectory was like? Was it an immediate winner? Was it a slow burn? Did it take a while to kind of take off? What was the story on getting this up and running?
Yeah, so the first 3 months since after I purchased it, the site would just, it had its natural increases and decreases. So I wasn't, taking it uphill at that point. But then I started, and it's a process, of course, so it doesn't go uphill from the first day or, so I started kind of doing some more SEO work and just kind of fixing up the things that I thought were wrong with it and kind of perfecting the process. And so in these past 3 months, the site's continued to see growth in all aspects, including, visitors to the site, revenue, number of orders, conversion rate, and profit. So that's seen a definite increase in the past few months. But the first few months I bought it, of course, I had to put in a little more work, to fix it up and everything. But at this point, it's continuing upward.
What was the trajectory before you bought it from the actual original builder? Like, was it fairly stable? Was it growing over time? Did it take off immediately?
So when I bought it, they were doing pretty decent with it, but from my perspective, I think they were kind of taking this as a completely passive business, which I don't think is okay for almost, 90% of websites. So they were doing well with it, but it was very inconsistent in revenue at the time. And I think that was more proportion to the amount of time they were putting in. And so as soon as I took it over, I started being very consistent with the time. And so that's why I saw growth more than they did, as opposed to what they saw, which was, up and down depending on the amount of time they were putting in.
When you took the site over, was it earning more than you expected, less than you expected, or right about where you expected when you purchased it?
Well, when I first purchased it, it went a little lower than I had expected. I don't know exactly why that happened, but once I started working on it, and I think that might have just been because I got it at a time where they had been very negligent, the previous owner, toward the site possibly. And so as soon as I purchased it, after a few weeks, once I started doing all the SEO work and, kind of just being very consistent with the customer support and stuff, then I started seeing growth after that. So then at that point, there was a decent growth. And then like I said, for the past few months, there's been consistent growth with the site.
That's the worst for us, Ahmed, as brokers, is when you have a seller, maybe it, sits there for 2-3 months before it sells and they're just negligent with the business and it starts to go into decline or whatever. And, buyers are definitely going to want a discount if they want to do the deal at all. Sometimes they get scared off because they see the declining earnings. So note to sellers, make sure that you keep everything running up until the actual deal is done. Tell me, what did you learn about, buying and building the site out that just worked, that would just seem to be magic? You're like, oh yes, I can apply this to any future flips I do. This process worked for me.
Yeah, so I guess it was more of just doing the required things. And for me, that was, I went in there and I always look at, the aesthetics. I look at whether the site looks good. And then, so I first did that. There were a few things that I didn't like, so I fixed that up. And then the second thing I did was I added, more mediums for customer support. So even though that doesn't necessarily mean, for example, adding a phone number to the site doesn't necessarily mean more people will call. But I think naturally when people see a phone number on a site, they just feel like it's a more legitimate site and they have a higher chance of purchasing. So I added that, and that's something I always, recommend, or I personally do, because it helps conversion rates. And then I went in there and I did more of the adding content to the site. And so I was just very consistent with that and added blog posts and stuff just once a week. And then I started implementing social media. So kind of the same process I've taken with any other site. And, it's not a magic formula, but it's just basic things that just have to be done with consistency.
Okay, so aesthetics you looked at, and that was one of the first things you looked at. You also looked at making sure that everything was working. You looked to add content. What was the other thing?
Making sure that there's a way for customers to get in touch with support, or just kind of building that confidence through, adding live chat, adding easy accessible contact form, adding a phone number and stuff like that. So just ways for the customer to know that, hey, if something was to go wrong or if they need help, there'll be ways for them to contact the support team or whoever's behind this.
Great tip. I mean, it just makes it seem more legitimate, right? You have the person behind the phone, they can reach out to. They've got obviously email support and they've got other ways to communicate with you. It just makes them feel more trustworthy. Even if they're not going to use it, that confidence factor is there for them. I think that's a really great tip. Is there anything with buying this site or running this site that just didn't work, that you tried to apply to the site and you're like, yeah, that wasn't such a win?
That's a good question. I haven't really went too much out of my way to do that. We did a few things where we tried to have it added onto directories and stuff. For example, just business directories. And I tried to do that in the first few months where, it was just a few websites that have a bunch of businesses on there. And, that ranges from, any type of business. And so we paid a little bit to add the website to those directories. And I think that was just something that didn't end up being profitable at all, just because they had, hundreds of thousands of businesses in there, and it just didn't. And the little traffic it did bring forth, it wasn't any targeted traffic. So I guess I would avoid, huge directories, especially if there's a need to pay for them.
Gotcha. So even if it worked, it just didn't move the needle enough to be worth it for you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about traffic and earnings. Now you said earlier about 51% of the traffic is organic. You get most of your customers through there. And that was the case even before you bought it, but it probably even improved as you added more content to the site and gave more opportunities for people to find you in the search results for various keywords. Tell me a little bit about the other methods. So you said you get some referral traffic. Where does that referral traffic come from? And do you do any social or any paid traffic to the site?
Yeah, so I did start social media the thing about the social media right now, and the reason it brings in such little traffic is because up until now, and I mean, even now, I tried to make it as a way where, people that are passionate about birds could come and discuss birds on the social media page and, just have conversations. So it hasn't been really a direct way to drive sales yet, but I think that would be a very beneficial way in the future. So what I was trying to do right now is just, kind of building a hobby around it where just like people go on forums and stuff to talk about their birds, they could come onto the website's Twitter page, for example, and talk about birds and stuff. So that's brought in a little bit of traffic. And other traffic that was brought in was stuff that I did before, and I haven't been doing that for the past few months. But basically when I first got the site, I posted on a few forums and stuff and, just said, hey, visit our site. And I mean, targeted forums that were in the birdcage niche or in the bird niche. And that's still bringing in a lot of the referral traffic. But most of that I think comes from, social media and stuff like that. And in terms of paid traffic, I started a very small paid traffic campaign. I mean, like less than $10 a month. And I saw quite a bit of traffic from there as well, but I haven't had a chance, quite frankly, to test that out yet. But because there are, the margins are very decent, I think paid traffic could definitely work because, there's a lot of leeway for margins.
One of the things I really like is, you mentioned going to some of the forums and communities to talk about birds and, mentioning it there. I think if you could make a name for yourselves there, if someone were to buy this site and really make a name for themselves there, I think they could do really well. They could also, get some paid traffic in those forums and communities. They're always looking to monetize. You mentioned Facebook, and I was thinking like a Facebook group for previous customers where they can get together and talk about, what's going on with their birds and what they're doing here and there. I think that could be pretty interesting. I think buying up Facebook pages that are already dedicated to bird lovers, or at least like setting up partnerships with them where, they can be an affiliate or they can get a piece or whatever of the deals they sell, I think would be a ton of value. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself talking about the opportunities for this, but I told you before the call that like this would be a Justin Cook purchase. If I was personally buying websites right now and businesses, this is something that I would seriously take a look at. So I've got some ideas there. Before we do that, let's talk a little bit about the earnings. So have the earnings been stable? Have they been like slightly increasing since you purchased it? What's up with that?
Yeah, so the earnings the first 3 months, they were pretty stable. There wasn't too much of a growth. They went down and up and down. It was a natural increase and decrease. But in the past 3 months, ever since, as you know, with websites, it takes a while for things to kind of settle in and stuff. So now that everything, ever since I fixed it up and took care of adding content and really created kind of a consistent model for the past 3 months, that's been, clearly showing through the site's traffic and earnings and profit and everything. And so for the past 3 to 4 months, the site has just seen consistent growth.
How much content is on the site and how much are you adding monthly right now?
So there's a ton of content on the site, honestly, and that's one thing that's been really attractive to a lot of the visitors and the potential customers that come onto the site. So right now I'm adding, honestly, just 4 articles a month, but there are at least like 80 to 90 articles on the blog. And there's also posts on the website itself just about how to purchase a cage or, what type of bird cage to purchase and just more specific to every species, which really, that's really helped people convert and, cause they've liked the information and it really just portrays legitimacy that this company is just not some random company selling cages. They actually have some sort of an idea on what they're doing because of the content available.
And it helps you separate yourself from Amazon where yes, they go to Amazon and buy a bird cage, but how are they going to know the exact right bird cage for their species and, that kind of thing too. So I think if you're able to help them through content, they're going to be more loyal and probably want to purchase through you. So I think that's an interesting approach. Let's talk a little bit about the opportunities for this business. If you were keeping the business and you wanted to give yourself a nice, slow and steady path of growth over the next, 1 to 5 years, what would you do to the site?
Okay, so first thing I would do is probably start a sales channel, and I'd start like talking to small breeders. And for those listening that don't know, breeders are basically the people that, they actually take care of the birds, and then they end up selling the birds to people who are interested. So I would talk to the smaller breeders, and, they always are looking for cages to purchase because they have so many birds. And so I would start that, and I would try to sell to them directly because they would buy in larger quantities. And so in fact, I actually tried this last month. I was like, hey, I've said this is a growth opportunity, so let me actually put it to the test. So actually within just a few calls, I had a breeder ready to place an order for 10 of the smaller cages on the site, and she ended up purchasing the 10 cages the next day. So I'm confident this will work. And, I put it to the test, and it was one test, but it definitely showed that there's potential for this. And then the second thing I would do is the same thing with the breeders. I would set up sort of an affiliate program. And basically it would be with these breeders, and they would refer their customers that they sell birds to the site to purchase cages. Because of course when someone purchases a bird, they need a cage with it. And so, I could maybe make an exclusive coupon for that breeder and do $5 off or something like that. And then every time someone would use the coupon for that particular breeder, they would get kind of an affiliate income. And I think that would be a very lucrative and very, easy way to get traffic onto the site, targeted traffic.
Absolutely. So, I go to my breeder, whatever, I pick up a new bird and I'm like, hey, I'd like to pick up another cage. And she's like, yeah. Go to this site and put in Mandy in the promo section. You'll get 5% off or whatever. And she goes over there, and then all of a sudden she gets a commission. You get a sale that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, in that situation, everyone wins, so she's happy. She got a commission, and I'm happy, it's traffic that would have otherwise not came in. And then, yeah. And so aside from that, I would just continue to do the weekly articles and the weekly social media, which is kind of like the slow and steady win, because that'll just continue to boost up rankings in the search engines and stuff like that. And lastly, which is something you also mentioned earlier, I would create a prominent presence in the niche related forums online and try to get traffic from that, because that traffic would be also very targeted. And if it can be done properly, it would be free traffic too, because it would be, and if the new buyer is able to create kind of, the legitimacy or kind of create a name for themselves in some of these niche related forums, at that point people really trust you, and they would take your recommendation to a website for purchasing a cage.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I like your opportunities. I think there are a ton. And as I was telling you before the show, I really think this could be, it's probably a very small lifestyle business right now. Like, you might be able to get by on it, but I think that within 12 to 18 months, you can make this a legit lifestyle business, making, $3,000 to $6,000 a month in profit. And, I like your suggestions. I think that would be interesting. As I mentioned earlier, I think a Facebook group where you get customers, you get other people involved in that community online, I think would be really interesting. I think potentially give you more customers. I love the idea of either buying up other Facebook pages that already have a lot of, bird enthusiasts, and seeing if you can either, buy those pages and use them to help market the business or something like that. I think a paid community eventually could form out of that. So maybe you start with the Facebook group and you buy up the Facebook pages, and eventually you have a paid community. I think, and this, you may think I'm crazy here, but I think a podcast potentially to the audience, if this is something that if you're into birds, I think that could be really valuable. Are you a bird guy? Like, do you know about the species or something? Like, how do you get the content for that?
No, honestly, I had no idea, and that's a lot of times that's what happens with me, is I go into niches and I have no idea what it's about, but that's kind of the interesting part for me. So, I mean, and it's really, in terms of just kind of knowing enough to handle the site is not a lot at all. I mean, you just need to know basic information that's on all the product listings. But in terms of kind of adding content, I mainly do research and just go, like I'll look up, 8 things that might suggest your budgie, which is a type of, bird, is sick. So I might just look that up and then kind of paraphrase it, give credit where it's due, and post that as content on the website, which would be original content. And, people are very interested in reading that stuff. So, I mean, I have no prior knowledge of birds or anything like that, but that's kind of what I do for the content.
Cool. So I think a buyer, could buy this without any prior knowledge and wouldn't have to learn a ton about it. Could probably find a writer that is a bit more familiar with birds and that kind of thing. Or if you don't know anything about it, or you do know something about it and you want to get into it, I think it's something you could pick up along the way. I think that would be very valuable. If you want to personally work on the site heavily over the next, couple of years and really build it out to be something, I think, significant in the niche, I think you'd probably have to learn about birds if you want to do that. And I think there's a huge opportunity to do that. But let's talk a little bit about the risks with this site, Ahmed. What do you see if you were buying the site today? And as a buyer, you have these concerns. What would be your concerns with this purchase?
So mine would be if the buyer is not able to be consistent with the work required. And I think that's the key here is just consistency. And if that doesn't happen, I think the site may start to underperform. For example, even though the customer support time required for each day is around 10 minutes, that 10 minutes itself is crucial and it must be put in consistently each day or it'll drive away potential buyers. And that's one thing that I've seen along many sites in the past, and especially with this site too, that it's not about, putting 2 hours of work Monday morning and then forgetting about it the rest of the week. It's just about the 10 minutes a day, which really, builds a legitimate customer base and gets your customers to trust you. And then at the same time, it's the same concept with the 20 minutes a week for the article and the other 20 minutes a week for the social media. So, 40 minutes per week doesn't seem that bad, and it isn't, but it has to be done with consistency. And I think that's the reason the site has seen growth in the past few months, because I've been very consistent with the weekly articles and the social media. And actually kind of going back to what you said about the new buyer, if they're not, comfortable writing the articles and stuff. So I did have a good friend of mine who's a content developer. And so for some of the weeks that I wasn't able to, he did do the weekly social media and article. And, if the new buyer isn't comfortable doing that, that could also be outsourced at a minimal cost to him. And, he's already very familiar with the site and the content that needs to be posted.
Cool. So if I were, let's say that, I wanted to spend 8 hours of work on the day and then go sailing for the next 2 weeks, you say that would significantly hurt business because I'm not keeping up on customer service requests. I'm not doing the social media posts. And even though I put in a bunch of work, and left it for 2 weeks, that's just not going to cut it with the site, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's just right. So it's about, maybe in the middle of a sailing break, you could put in the 10 minutes, but it's not exactly, it's not about the 8 hours. It's more about just doing it every single day.
Gotcha. Okay. And then any other risks, like what's the backlink profile like? What did you do for backlinks on the site?
It's been mostly organically. So it's been, in the first few months I did, for example, the forums and stuff. I don't have too heavy of a knowledge in SEO and when it comes to backlinking. So I didn't do I didn't do a crazy amount of backlinking, but it was mainly through the forums and, like I said, through the directories, which didn't help too much, but it still created a backlink. Other than that, if someone has a decent amount of SEO knowledge in terms of backlink, I think that would be an advantage they'd have over me on this site. So my main way of driving traffic organically was through the social media platform and then adding content.
Great, Ahmed. Let's talk a little bit about work required because we were touching on that briefly. Can you tell me a little bit about the exact type of work you do? And you said about 10 to 15 minutes a day in customer service, and then how much per day in like social media posting?
Yeah, so in customer support, it's usually 10 to 15 minutes. It's normally toward the 10-minute end. That's basically replying to 1 or 2 emails and then a phone call or 2, and it's just returning those emails or returning those calls. And in terms of social media, I actually do that once per week. And basically what I do is I use a software that posts automatically for the rest of the week. So I'll post on a Sunday and it'll post until the next Sunday. And I prefer that over having to do 5 minutes a day. And part can be done, 20 minutes and it'll post on all the platforms. So I'll post on, for example, Twitter, and it'll kind of move it around the software, and it'll post on Facebook and the one Google+. And then the other weekly requirement would be the article, which is, I would say, 20 minutes a week as well.
Okay, cool. And then, we use the same thing for social media. We use Buffer.
Mm-hmm.
So it allows us to, set up, you can use Hootsuite or whatever else you're using.
Hootsuite's the one I use.
Cool. It's also good to, I think, I don't know if you're doing this, but even though you just do that once during the week, to check in periodically a couple times and for any comments or be able to respond to people, because sometimes you do get customer service requests via Facebook or whatever. Do you get that for this site or no?
I don't think I've really gotten, maybe a couple months ago, I might have gotten one on Facebook, which was someone requesting to have it shipped to Australia or something. But most of the times it's on the main activities on Twitter and Google+, and that's usually people replying to the content, I posted, or, a picture or something. So I haven't seen, and I do keep up with that, which is, it's a lot easier to, throughout the week periodically check on that and reply to people as opposed to, focusing on posting new content. So that's why I keep that for, once a week. And then I'll periodically go in there and just reply to someone's comment, or, it's usually just, hey, nice picture or something like that if we post a picture of a bird or something.
Yeah, I can do that, in a taxi while I'm, heading somewhere or whatever, respond really quick. So yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly.
We already talked about the fact that you don't have to necessarily be a bird expert to take over the site. In fact, you don't really have to know much about birds at all if you want to take over and run the site. But what skills or requirements should someone have if they want to take over the site? And then what skills would be really beneficial, do you think, in growing it out?
Yeah, so I guess the main requirement just to keep it where it is would be, basic ability to write and speak in English. And then, of course, the ability to, do a little bit of research and write the content and the articles and stuff like that. And, be a little creative on the social media and as in posting pictures and stuff like that. So I think that's the main, basic things that would be required. And then in terms of growth, if someone had, knowledge on birds, for example, or an extensive knowledge on bird cages, I mean, if people know about that stuff, on the get-go, then that would be super beneficial. And then, of course, SEO knowledge would, of course, be really beneficial in growing the sites. But, of course, those would be more to, really take off with the site as opposed to keeping it where it is and doing consistent but slow growth.
Yeah, you don't have to know birds. I really hope that a bird lover gets it, though. A bird lover with a business sense gets this and just absolutely crushes it, man. If they do, you're going to have that like seller's remorse thing going on, though. You're going to see this site take off and be like, maybe I should have kept it. I don't know. I've seen sellers do. Have you ever done that with a sale that you've had where you look back and you're like, oh my God, I shouldn't have sold that one?
Most of the times I don't, just because I know that even if I had ended, like I said, I kind of get bored after a while. I mean, and for me it was just like, well, I'm glad that, the new buyer's doing well, but I probably couldn't have done that well because I would have gotten bored at that point, or I would have started focusing on something else. So, I mean, I've had that kind of, but, most of the times it's just, hey, good for you.
Yeah. All right, man. Some additional information. You already said that you happily commit to a non-compete. That's, not really of interest to you in staying in the space. One question buyers ask is, how much support are you offering buyers? Now, it is a drop shipping site, so it's not terribly complicated, but there are going to be some things, especially for maybe a new buyer, that they, need to kind of work through and need some help with. How long are you willing to stay on via email? Or, how much phone support are you willing to offer a new buyer?
Yes, I mean, I'd be more than happy to provide like 30 days of, a standard 30 days of Skype chat support. And if the buyer prefers email, then that's fine with me as well. And then, of course, I would be happy to add like 5 to 10 hours of phone or Skype call outside of the training I'll already provide. So, if the buyer just wants to get in touch with me in those 5 hours about, growth opportunity or anything else pertaining to the site, that wouldn't be included in the standard training. And, I'm always happy to provide additional support, even if that means, months after the purchase. And I think I told you this before, I still occasionally get on the phone and answer questions for the buyer of my previous site or explain things to him when he has questions, even though it's been around well over 3 months. But, I understand it can be pretty nerve-wracking for someone when they first purchase a site. So, I'll do my absolute best to be as helpful as possible and help the new owner succeed with the site, whether that be a couple of days, months, or even a year after, because, it's just a phone, and I'm always on my computer, I'm always a phone call away. So I'm more than happy to continue to provide support until the seller feels comfortable with the site and doing everything on his or her own.
Cool, Ahmed. And then you're also, obviously you'd prefer 100% cash payout, done with the deal, but, sometimes we do get offers that are not 100% straight up cash. Would you be open to something where it was like 80% upfront and 20% 60 days after closing, just, to make sure they get the training they need, or something where it's like 70% upfront, 30% over the next 4 months based on hitting certain revenue goals? Are you open to an earnout?
For the most part, I would prefer that we did it up front. And the reason for that is because once I sell the site, I'll no longer have a residual income to fund my startup. So I'd like to have the, entire capital available for whenever it's needed. But I do understand the concern with, guaranteeing that support will be there. And for the most part, I've worked with y'all before and that's never been a problem. But, if need be, I'd be willing to sign a contract or something that said, hey, I'll be here at least 60 days after the sale to make sure to provide support. But just because doing an upfront and then, 20% later deal just wouldn't be in my best business interest to do that, because I'd like the capital available to be able to fund my startup and stuff like that.
Cool, Ahmed. So let's do a quick wrap up here. The niche we're talking about is bird cages. The site was built in November 2012. You purchased it, I believe, in December 2014. The monthly revenue on this one is $7,365. That's the 3-month average. Expenses are $5,490. Net profits are $1,874 over the last 3 months. Page views are right around 11,000 a month. It's a big commerce site, has 110 email subscribers, a little bit of action on Facebook and Twitter, which are coming with it as well. Amit, give me your best pitch in 30 seconds on why someone should purchase this site.
Well, it's a hassle-free site and it has a ton of room for growth. And, it's just something that people are very passionate about. And anytime there's people that are passionate about a product or about a niche and those people also have money, that's a winner in my book. So, and there's just a ton of untapped potential that could really make this a true winner for the new buyer. And it's not a complicated site at all. It's a very simple dropship model. So.
Great, Amit. If you're a listener to this, you're watching this, and you want more information about the business for sale, if you're at the Empire Flippers listing page, look up in the top right-hand corner. You can pay a deposit. This is a 100% refundable deposit, and we'll send you all the information, including revenue screenshots, including traffic access, including, all the information we've talked about so that you can do your due diligence and take a look. If you're watching this somewhere at Vimeo or YouTube or something like that, click on the link in the description and that'll take you to the listing page and you can get more information about this business for sale. Ahmed, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. Appreciate it.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me, man.